This episode of ChatEDU is sponsored by the National Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. Liz, I believe, let me think about this. They're doing something.
Yes, they are hosting a community of practice on Thursday, May 14th, 2026 at 1 p.m. Eastern Time.
Fantastic. You can learn more at nextgenmfg.org.
Sounds good.
Liz, you're famous on the ChatEDU podcast for being, two things really. First, a foodie, and then second, a fashionista. Is that right?
Foodie, if you're talking about my connoisseurship of all things chicken fingers.
I mean, I see you have in your ChatEDU mug there a hot cocoa with or without mini marshmallows?
Oh, with.
Okay.
Extra marshmallows.
So do you also go to Starbucks and order a triple venti, foam, skim, blah, blah, blah?
No, I am not a coffee drinker.
Okay, so neither of Starbucks. I don't know if this story is going to relate to you then, but apparently the folks at Starbucks and OpenAI through ChatGPT felt like people needed some assistance, right? So like you pull up into Starbucks and you're not sure if you want to have a matcha macchiato or a green tea something. I don't know what these things are. I actually go to Starbucks all the time, but I'm a pretty straightforward kind of guy. But they're not sure what to order, but then they think, if I only had an AI that would tell me what to order based on like my mood or maybe even the clothes I chose to wear today. Does that feel like that would be a real assist in the world of Dr. Elizabeth Rade?
Not at all. Okay. But you know who would love it? My teenagers.
Oh, there you go. Well, this is for them then. From Futurism, Starbucks' baffling ChatGPT collab that treats customers like empty, soulless venti cups. You know what a venti is, by the way?
It's a size.
Yes, it's the big one. All right. So tell us about what Starbucks and OpenAI have dreamed up here, Dr. Rade.
Yeah. Okay. They launched a partnership with OpenAI to integrate into the Starbucks app this widget within ChatGPT that allows users to receive personalized drink recommendations, as you said, based on their mood, outfit, or photos. I mean, critics and journalists have just panned this entire collaboration. You know, it's complicating the ordering process, especially for the baristas that are going to have to do it.
Yeah, because they're making up names, right? So like beta testing from Futurism resulted the AI recommended. This is like partially probably some hallucinations like, hey, you should have a mango dream energy drink.
But I am thinking of my daughters when they go in, like on Instagram, there must be like recommendations of like, get this. And so she goes in with her phone and is like, I want 2 shots of this thing, and then this drizzle, that drizzle, like making up her own order.
Yeah, it's like $30 too, right?
Yeah. I'm like, just order the freaking thing on the menu.
Well, I think you should have the girls try out the new, I think you just put like at Starbucks in the middle of your ChatGPT thread. So see if this is helpful. It's funny, just as we were getting started, I was recording a check-in about Mark Zuckerberg creating an AI avatar of himself and observing, right, that if you think about the Bright Bites on the podcast, if all these folks would put their energy into building Bright Bites and not doing these kinds of shenanigans, maybe we wouldn't see the significant backlash, right? Last week we covered the idea of people throwing Molotov cocktails and shooting at Sam Altman's house. Obviously horrible, right? But this kind of stuff does not help as far as the public opinion goes. Well, that's a cheery start. So with that, I'm Matt Mervis.
And I'm Liz Rade.
And this is ChatEDU, the show about leading and learning in the age of AI. In today's episode, from think tank to action tank, we're going to feature a conversation that I had with Milken's Emily Musil. And we're going to turn this kind of like big think interview where Emily talks about her work at the Milken Institute. It is good stuff.
All right, Matt, but let's get down to the full rundown of today's show. We'll start with an AI agent experiment that follows on the heels of the not so fabulous AI vending machine efforts in the offices of Anthropic and the Wall Street Journal.
That was one of your favorite.
It was.
Then we're going to talk a little bit about a little pre-conference. We've got a big conference. Our 6th sold-out conference is coming up on May 1st. zSpace is our sponsor. We're going to talk a little bit about some work they're doing in our backyard in Danbury, Connecticut.
And after that, we'll get an update from the U.S. Department of Education about how they plan to prioritize funds for AI work with both students and teachers.
Yeah, then we're going to do 3 unique studies on AI lesson plans, children's media, and a really, really wonderful small scale kind of a study. They basically followed a bunch of 8th graders. But what this young woman said at the end, it just made my day.
Yes. And for this week's interview, we'll chat with Emily Musil, who is the managing director at the Milken Institute. Matt has a wide-ranging conversation with Emily about her take on AI as a mom, as a former college professor and in her fascinating role at the Milken Institute. And of course, we'll end with another great Bright Bite.
Fantastic. All right. Now listen, Liz, we talked a little bit about the AI vending machines. We covered it first at Anthropic, then at the Wall Street Journal. This is when Anthropic basically tried to give an AI agent a vending machine to run to see if it could do long horizon memory complicated tasks. And it was like colossal and hysterical, and some wins and a lot of fails. The same company, which is Andan Labs, which is kind of like embedded inside of Anthropic. This is from the Andan Labs blog. We gave AI a 3-year retail lease in San Francisco and asked it to make a profit. So this is a more complicated AI agent story, right? Anthropic basically through Andan Labs creates up this operating agent called Luna, powered by Claude 4.6. And then the idea is that Luna's going to, as an agent, going to like take this space and hire and staff and decorate and do all the stuff. So how's it going so far?
So it definitely...
You have a look of disbelief, by the way.
Yeah, what are they even doing here?
It's I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I mean, I do love their creativity. All right, but sorry.
So they have this AI agent named Luna, and Luna manages all business operations, including signing that 3-year lease, designing branding, ordering inventory, and then hiring human employees to handle the physical tasks that AI can't do. This experiment highlights the shift from AI automating white-collar work to AI managing blue-collar workers, which raise all kinds of ethical concerns and discussions about disclosure and autonomous management.
Sure, right. So Luna did everything. Like Luna hired the workers into the physical labor that did they got gig workers basically to paint and do the furniture and all this kind of stuff. Didn't always lead with the fact that Luna was an agent. They used the pronoun she, although it's an it, right? It's the zeros and ones. There was a little bit of anxiety around that. Someone even declined the job because they were uncomfortable working for an AI agent.
The 2 full-time employees are actually employed by Andan Labs to make sure that they legally get paid and have fair wages and are legally protected during the experiment. But they're selling these ironic book selections like Super Intelligence and Brave New World and Steal Like an Artist. And
they're creative and have a sense of humor, there's no doubt. Yeah, this interface between agents and the physical world is fascinating. Allie K. Miller did this really cool clip on social media where do you have a nest of cables somewhere in your house? Mine's next to my cable box. It's just like a total S show.
Oh, yeah.
So someone had an OpenClaw agent go out onto TaskRabbit and hire somebody, schedule them with their calendar, and then a tasker, like TaskRabbit, people just come and do stuff at your house, came for $30 and cleaned up all the wires and got it done. It was this cool, and all the user did is typed into OpenClaw, hire me somebody to get this task done. I mean, lots could go wrong, but still very interesting. So we'll keep tracking these.
If you're in San Francisco, go check out this store. I want to know more.
Yeah, actually, I've been listening to some stories about this. There's been a lot of traffic at the store because people just want to go check it out, right?
If I was in San Francisco, I'd totally go.
100%. All right, we'll drop that in the show notes. Real quickly, so as we said, on May 1st, we have our 6th sold-out conference here at our offices in Litchfield, Connecticut. If you weren't able to get in, because lots of folks in the audience from ChatEDU who have joined us, this is almost as exciting as going to ASU GSV. It's kind of the same thing. Right?
About the same, yeah.
So anyhow, if you are interested, we will put up the registration soon for the fall conference because folks are already asking for that. But zSpace, who we've covered a few times, is our sponsor on this one. zSpace does these really cool, as I'm looking at my laptop now on a zSpace machine, like a heart or a brake system or something interactive would come out of the screen, but I don't have to wear special glasses. I can use a pencil and move things around. I mean, really, really neat stuff. So they're our sponsor. So we do want to say, because they are doing a big implementation in Danbury Public Schools, which I believe is the 6th largest school district in the state. At one point, Danbury High School was one of the largest high schools in the country.
Yeah.
Fun facts. Nonetheless, Danbury is scaling their zSpace implementation. They've gone from a limited pilot study to 30 devices per building across the middle and the high school. Expansion really prioritizes equity by making sure that, alternative and expulsion programs and career pathways, Danbury's doing a bunch of really cool stuff around career pathways, and STEM all have access to these systems. Anything else we need to say about this one, Liz?
It supports all kinds of different academic areas, which is cool. So most kids, I hope, will get their hands on it at some point because it's health science, it's chemistry, it's engineering, it's general career readiness. Superintendent Dr. Carrick has Miro, who's a friend of the show.
Yeah, great. Great soup.
She stated the move was intended to move beyond simple instruction to ensure every student can actively participate in immersive lessons. So just great. We're excited for zSpace. We're excited for Danbury. We'd love to visit. We'd love to see what the kids are doing. So hopefully we'll get a chance to see what they're doing down in Danbury.
Yeah, and zSpace will be running some sessions and doing some demos at the conference here on May 1st. So we'll have more to share as we move into the middle of May. All right, real quickly from Higher Ed Dive, not Drive, Dive.
Yes.
It's kind of funny because, like, I don't know, it makes sense, but then you have the whole dive bar thing. So anyway, how the education department will prioritize AI in awarding grants. I think we're just going to say briefly here that it's become a priority, right? So across the ecosystem, though there is some criticism, Kosin and others have pointed out that there's not a dedicated funding stream, but we're seeing this across what is left of the now slightly more slimmed down Department of Education, that there is a real encouragement of AI across special education, early intervention, personalized learning, and the like. So we will drop in the link to the K-12 Dive story. Okay, Liz, from my backyard, right?
Your backyard.
University of Massachusetts Amherst, just a short hour away through the hills of Western Massachusetts, an award-winning paper by Dr. Tori Trust, who is, by the way, the keynote speaker. I'm finally doing a little bit of work in my own backyard in the Berkshire Hills of Western Massachusetts. Dr. Fadia Rostam, who is a Berkshire County resident, put together with Berkshire Community College a really cool, I think it's May 12th. It's like an AI summit. Anyhow, Tori Trust is the keynote speaker. But tell us about this award-winning paper from the 2026 SITE conference.
Yeah. So in this paper, she analyzed 450 AI-generated lesson plans. And the research found that AI tools, including both general chatbots and education-specific platforms like Magic School AI, largely fail to produce high-quality, technology-rich learning experiences and instead favor kind of passive, teacher-centered instruction.
The good news is that we're banning technology across the entire K-12 ecosystem, so it doesn't matter that there aren't K-12-rich experiences.
No, we're not.
Oh, sorry.
You're just being a little
snarky on a Tuesday?
Hyperbolic.
Okay.
Yes.
Please, as I often say, carry on.
Okay. So the study analyzed civics education lesson plans specifically by general AI chatbots like ChatGPT and Copilot and Gemini, and then also Magic School and Brisk. And findings indicated that interactive digital technologies were actually missing from the majority of these AI lesson plans.
It is a little ironic, isn't it?
Yeah. And when technology was included, it was usually like passive teacher-centered purposes, like watching PowerPoint presentations or showing videos. So, it's a little bit problematic as more teachers use AI for lesson planning. Like, you really have to be aware that these tools do not currently provide the high-quality, technology-rich experiences necessary for the digital age. So, I think about this all the time because we know that schools have high-quality instructional materials, especially in our area. And when I was at Penn, my advisor did a lot on research-based curricula and fidelity to curricula. And I'm just like, AI has just opened up this new door. We were worried about teachers pay teachers with just like making worksheets and buying lesson plans from other teachers. And now you can just generate mediocre lessons from AI.
Sure. We observed a while ago that the most frequently generated asset coming out of Magic School was a worksheet, right?
Right.
But it's interesting because it's not like this is not a solvable problem. We work with teachers every week that are building really cool gems, and into the gems are attaching knowledge like, standards around their HQIM, high quality instructional materials, or, I want it to be tech. When a teacher brings their intentionality to the lesson design process, if they're trying to speed it up, then a really well-designed prompt or a gem can be super effective around that. So it's not like it's a default done deal, but the default tools out of the shelf aren't necessarily killing it.
And we usually, we've been showing teachers how to generate lesson plans for 3 years now. And we always say the first lesson is like a C, a mediocre lesson. And then they have to go back and forth to build in more. Like it's not generating the perfect lesson from the beginning, and we've always said that.
Yep. No, well said. Absolutely. All right. So the second in this trifecta of studies is about slop. So last week we got a fun note from Jonathan. He's like, slopaganda. Huh, that's interesting. So this is AI slop flooding children's media. Parents should be very alarmed. This is from the 74, which we increasingly are really enjoying. So tell us, Liz, what did the 74 find when it comes to AI slop? And actually, this was sort of like hard-hitting journalism because YouTube did a little bit of shifting based on the outcome of this reporting.
These platforms like YouTube just have tons of low-quality AI-generated video content that is just, people are putting on for their kids, but there's risks to early childhood development because they're actually like just inaccurate, and it's, can really just cause problems. The guys on Hard4 covered this a while ago, and I watched some of the videos, and they're just like wrong. It's like a video about vowels, and then a consonant will dance by, or like, these videos have like lyrics that say like green means right. Like, no, it doesn't. And
Well, it could from an environmental perspective, but
I mean, sure.
how about these U.S. states? These
Yeah, like Oklahoma.
Oh, I've never been to Oklahoma.
Or Lugasilia. So like, it's physical hazards are depicted, like kids riding without seatbelts and, infants eating whole grapes, which is a choking hazard. Babies eating honey, also a problem. So, I mean, it's just like YouTube did end up terminating 6 channels for violating terms of service, but, they're like creating 10,000 videos in 7 months, this one channel, JoJo Funland, which is 50 new videos daily compared to 3,900, which Sesame Street produced over 20 years. So it's just bad. But like, again, like parents will put on YouTube and they could start somewhere good. They could start with Sesame Street, and then, YouTube just keeps playing. And so you go from something high quality like Sesame Street, and then all of a sudden it's songs about green means right, or songs about vowels and consonants are dancing by. So
I just want to go to Oklahoma personally. So a little good news though here, Liz.
Yeah, I mean, Carla Engelbrecht, who is a children's media creator, is developing an AI tool specifically designed to detect the AI slop in YouTube videos for children.
No, so no one's really going to get to go to Oklahoma.
Oh, so sad.
All right, finally, Liz, in the end of this rundown, we have a very different kind of study. This is one that has one of the most apt things I've read in quite a while.
Loved
and we'll save it for the end of your summation, maybe a dramatic reading. So this is a group of students took a deep dive into AI for a whole year. This was covered in Education Week. I love the setup on this. So you got 9 8th graders at Percy Julian Middle School in Oak Park, Illinois. And they did a year-long cohort where they used Gemini for academic and personal goals. It's funny, like they had to give up their lunch. They had to give up outside time. When they first got invited to join this thing, they all thought that they were in trouble for using AI, which is just hysterical.
Yeah.
But tell us about the outcomes here. Super interesting. Kind of like, again, it's a small scale study, but it's just really following these students and getting their input.
One student used AI to create a 30-day roadmap for improving test-taking skills. Another coded an app to control a home computer from a school Chromebook. Students emphasize that AI should be used as a thought partner to explore different possibilities rather than a replacement for original thought when they shared their presentation. So they got to actually talk to over 60 educators and parents about what they experienced. So it was really cool.
Yes, the part I really love, though, there's a lot. The article's really interesting, going through like teachers who are a little bit skeptical. Some teachers really changed their perspective from hearing students talk openly about this shift from being like a doer for me to a thought partner for me. But one of the prevailing themes that we hear all the time is like, is AI going to replace teachers? And I love this student. I'm going to put it into my keynotes now. There's this beautiful summation right at the end. Tell us what she had to say.
Yeah, so Josie Baker, who's 14, said, "Your teachers will actually laugh at your jokes and make you feel important and make you feel loved. I don't think AI could ever take that away."
Yeah, Josie Baker, you are my hero.
Yes.
All right, Doc, we're going to take a quick break and hear about the upcoming micro-credential, which starts on April 27th, which will be when this comes out the following Monday. Is that right? Yeah, fantastic. But still time, right? And we have people who sometimes register during the first week, which is fine.
Yeah.
So lots of enrollments are coming in. There is still time indeed, but we're going to cut to a break. And though, if you're enjoying ChatEDU, please, if you're not following, follow, like, share, comment, all the good things. If you are following, what should folks do?
They should share it with a gaggle of their friends.
Fantastic. If you enjoy our insights on AI and education, don't miss our next 6-week AI and education micro-credential launching this spring in partnership with Southern Connecticut State University on April 27th. This self-paced online course for educators and leaders in primary, secondary, and higher education across the globe covers AI essentials from foundational concepts like effective and impactful prompting to advanced skills like multilingual video translation, AI-driven assessments, and even vibe-coded software development that truly anyone can do. We've added a bunch of new content for the spring cohort, including a focus on emerging risks like AI companions, energy, and the environment. We'll also dive into the latest in Notebook LM, which frankly could be a course unto itself. There are new student AI literacy resources, as well as important updates on student-facing tools like custom gems and guided learning in Gemini. Each cohort features 4 live Zoom sessions for hands-on support, and participants can earn a Credly digital credential upon completion. To learn more or register, visit skills21.org/AI/micro, or feel free to email us at chatEDU@edadvance.org. Again, the course starts on April 27th, and we hope you'll be able to join us. Well, as promised, we're really excited to be joined here with Emily Musil. And Emily, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you, by the way? You've got a cool background. I love the brick. So where are you? And tell us a little bit about your work.
I am currently at my home in Maryland. I work out of the DC office of the Milken Institute.
Do you have kids that are school age or a little bit older?
I do. I have 2 school-age children, a son in 4th grade and a daughter in 7th grade.
Why don't we just jump in right there, right? The mom perspective, dying to hear about Milken. I'm a big fan, interested in the work, but you've got a child that is now moving into the AI zone, maybe showing up with friends in school. How are you thinking about that as a mom?
Well, I would say the way that they are using AI at home, I am watching really carefully and setting a lot of limits on, which she is not pleased about. I would say at school, I don't know that they're using it quite enough yet. So it depends on the environment. I believe AI is an extremely powerful tool. It's obviously been around for a while, but people are really embracing and talking about generative AI. It's now part of our national policy to try to get AI into schools. How we do that is the real big question.
It's not your job to be a K-12 AI education expert, but it's interesting that you say maybe not seeing what you're hoping to see so far. What do you think it might look like? What would you like to see? And there's an age piece too, like a lot of the schools that we work with, they really don't start until the kids are maybe like 8th and 9th grade. But what do you think would be a helpful step? And maybe your daughter's school's listening, so you could just give them a little bit of advice now.
Great. Yeah, I think it's a nuanced answer, if I may, that I think there is the creation and use of AI by students, and then there is the use of AI by educators. So those are, I really see those as 2 different things. Where I think we could do a lot more and early is using adaptive software to really reach children in an individualized way. My children are in public school here in Maryland, and there are large classrooms, and the best teachers really still cannot reach every single student every single moment. That's just not humanly possible. I think if you can use tools that can support child-driven learning, no matter where they are in their learning journey, that is something that will actually help teachers, parents, coaches along the way.
I think that makes a lot of sense and very similar to a lot of the work that my co-host, Dr. Elizabeth Rade, and I advocate for. All right, perfect. I think we'll come back to students in a lot of different lenses, but tell us a little bit about your life on the work side, your work with the foundation. Super interested also in the intersection between sort of startups and students developing startup style skills. So excited to learn more.
Yes, great. Well, I am currently, my role is managing director at the Milken Institute. I'm in our strategic philanthropy department. So the Milken Institute, for those who aren't familiar, is a nonpartisan, nonprofit global think tank. We work across sectors, trying to get people to communicate with each other across sectors to help have more people find more meaningful and build more meaningful lives. That can be financially, mentally, physically. How do you have health in all of those areas in your life? So part of what we do is build blueprints and really see how people can allocate their resources. That can be their time, their networks, their philanthropic capital, their investment dollars, so that you can have a really high impact. For strategic philanthropy specifically, what's exciting about this work is we work with people who are really interested in how they can get the most impact out of their philanthropic dollars. And so many people who are interested in philanthropy care about education. So we've had a long history of being interested in and caring about education and educators and students. The Milken Foundation, our founder, Michael Milken, and his family have worked with Milken Scholars, the Educator Awards. Education is one of the main pillars in our Milken Center for Advancing the American Dream. On the institute side of the think tank, what we really wanted to do was put some work out that could give some actionable steps for people we work with. This started with a report that we published in November, and currently we are working on roadmaps for future of education and work. So it's a whole lot of stuff, and I feel like the personal and professional always blends, because as I'm doing this work professionally, and I have kids in school, and I used to be a college professor, I sit on a board of trustees at a university. It's all really about human learning at all stages of life.
I love it. It's like you're the perfect person for that role. Do you mind unpacking a little bit of those roadmaps? So what does that look like as it gets a little bit closer to the ground level, to classrooms or to, informal learning environments? Yeah.
Sure. So, well, first I'm going to talk a little bit about how and why we do the roadmaps, because it's also related. I told you we are a think tank. And one of the things we see when we look at the future of work is how AI is disrupting the knowledge economy. This is one of the things that we see as a stressor in higher education. Is a college degree going to get you employed? Is it going to allow you to have economic mobility and stability the way that college degrees for so long have been really a great bet for having that sort of economic mobility? There's lots of data behind that. But now we're seeing these knowledge economies and other professionalized careers really being disrupted by AI. So sitting in the think tank, we said to ourselves, not only are we going to try to create roadmaps to show other people where we think there's really high impact areas, where we should really focus your time, attention, dollars to have the biggest change, but also to look inward at ourselves. So we, on our team, we started training all of our researchers in strategic foresight and future casting. And we created these roadmaps to be really dynamic and something that we update regularly so that we're watching trends. So I'll take just a second on that, if I may.
Please.
So much of our research and many white papers, research papers are based on data, evidence, everything that has been. Obviously, we still want to have that foundation for rigorous research. What this methodology includes is really looking at trends and signals so that you look 10 years into the future and we say, all right, what do we think education can and should look like in this case, 2036? So what are those systems and structures, and really a 360 view? Where do we see it could be, and what's our preferred future state? And then we backcast and say, okay, what choices do we need to make now so that we can get to that preferred future state? So these roadmaps, we're talking to a lot of people, we're having convenings around it, and we'll be updating them regularly so that it's not just something static as we continue to look at these trends.
Really interesting. If it's okay, I want to kind of peel that back even a little bit further. So lately, as I've been doing professional development, I do a lot of professional learning for K-12, higher ed staff. I've been having them start, because sometimes my job is tool stuff. I've been having them start with Gemini's deep research, right? So inside deep research, all of a sudden, someone will put in a task and they will get essentially a white paper, well documented, well sourced. They could go take that deep research and they could move it into Notebook LM. These are just tools, right? But all of a sudden, this 20-page research document is also now accompanied with infographics and slides and communication vehicles. The reason I do that in part is to say, this is what white-collar knowledge work looked like for a long time, right? This is what junior level consultants do and attorneys do. And it's not contract writing or research, but it's very similar. But how does the roadmap think about, okay, great, AI is now doing this kind of like foundation or a couple pieces of foundational entry-level work, and then what do we do about that?
Great. Thank you, Matt. That is a great question, even though you stole some of my talking points.
Oh, sorry.
Take
them back.
So,
Emily.
we really we sat down as a team, and we actually went to Gemini as well. We looked at a lot of the different platforms, and in fact, we often will have about 3 or 4 competing, and we say, okay, let's put in some prompts and let's see what comes out of this. That was part of our process. And then let's make a podcast out of that. I mean, all of these things that you can do now, this is exactly the point why we shifted and we said, how do we need to communicate with people? And what is the best use of our time? Because as a nonprofit, we also are on philanthropic dollars. So it's not just advising others. We want to make sure that we are using the best of everyone's time and really using those talents. And certainly research has changed dramatically. I got a doctorate from UCLA many years ago. And I will say the way that research has shifted, the tools have really changed dramatically in that amount of time. Now, what hasn't changed is the way you think about and question complex problems. Mm-hmm. So part of even this methodology I just laid out around strategic foresight, I think of it the same way as the type of work I did as an historian. So my PhD is in history. And with history, you're looking at all of these trends, the technological trends, socioeconomic trends, political trends, all of those things in the past. And how do people make choices at that time? How did it affect every piece of everyone's life? That's the same type of analysis we're doing when we look forward. So when I think about these tools, is it sort of replacing? I think we really just need to make sure people understand how to ask questions, what we're trying to solve, communicate with people. I mentioned part of this was also convenings, interviewing a lot of people, human to human, because you can just spit out a research paper in, a minute at this point. So we really, to have value, you need to have the right types of questions. This brings us right back to the purpose of education and the type of learning we want to have. The way that you used to be able to say someone was really successful academically is not the same markers that we have now, or at least it shouldn't be. And it certainly should not be the same markers we use 10 years from now. People will need to have different skills. They will need to be able to demonstrate knowledge in a different way that is not a perfectly structured 5-paragraph essay necessarily. Before all the English teachers get mad at me for saying that, we still want to understand how and why you structure them. But it's going to be really delivered in a different way and measured in a different way. If we are really going to have learners across the spectrum from kids, young people, early career, mid-professional and on, we all really need to be thinking about how we engage with technology and have those very human questions, solving critical, complex problems, being able to communicate with each other alongside technology and using those tools that can be helpful rather than displacing.
Well, it makes me feel better that, coming from a think tank and a foundation that's got an awesome pedigree, I mean, it's sort of similar because I think this is confounding to educators, both in higher ed. And so, it is a question of, okay, great. Yes, AI can spit out that report and do that podcast. But then what are the critical thinking skills to make sure that what is in that document is accurate? Is there quality assurance? And then exactly as you said, what's the human skills now of taking that report and building consensus and getting people on the same page or forging a strategy, which in a way could be fun because you're sort of like, you're just jumping up the ladder a little bit in terms of the skills, but you have a higher ed background. What's your, I'm glad you're not in that environment right now. And I know you have some neat affiliations to higher education, but if you had to look down a group of humanities professors and say, oh, no problem, AI is going to do the report. Now you just have to teach the kids to do quality control and assurance. Not quality control, that sounds stiff. Like, make sure that you really critically think about the outputs and then engage in the human skills to build consensus. Is that a doable thing? Does that even sell in higher ed? Could they make that kind of pivot? Is it the right pivot? I know these are big questions, but you're a big thinker.
Yes. So thank you for that one. And I would say I'm a big fan still of the liberal arts. So, there's humanities, but really liberal arts more broadly. And that's where I was a professor of liberal arts. I'm a product of a liberal arts education. And I think there is a huge value there that is something that actually we've been seeing in our research produces skills that are really going to be needed in the future. So if I were sitting here, and I don't know if there are humanities or liberal arts, social sciences teachers and professors who are listening, but I think they would be very engaged, because the people that I know who are in the social sciences, humanities, liberal arts schools want to be able to answer and have students engage with real world problems and solutions. They're seeing this in their classroom. Most of them don't want to be doing rote learning anyway. So I don't want to speak for a whole, sector of people, but I'm picturing my former colleagues and, friends I have, all these people who are currently engaged in this work. And I think there's a little bit of like many political things, there's a little bit of a false dichotomy out there of people who they're sort of for or against. I think people want to understand, how do we use these new tools and keep the things that are very human. One other piece I would say for humanities in particular is the question about human ethics. It's not just collaboration. There's really an ethical core that is going to be absolutely critical as we have this rapidly advancing technology. Anyone who's following this at all, or even reading just headline news, knows this question about ethics with our big tech companies. Literally headlines just a couple days ago, these sort of questions. What are the safety standards? What should and shouldn't they do? Surveillance of people. What sort of impact will something have? Does it affect different communities in different ways? Is there bias inherent? All these sort of questions. You're going to need ethical thinkers. So I wouldn't just say, is there a future for it? I would say we absolutely need to have humanities, liberal arts. At the same time, and I don't know if we have a link to, but we just published our report in November, the computing imperative.
For sure. Yes, absolutely. Promise.
So these really go hand in hand. So our report, the computing imperative, was talking about, particularly for an American audience, how important it is to have these skills, computational thinking, really advanced, high-level skills, not just somewhat of a knowledge, but we need to be able to be producing high-level technological workers and thinkers. So at the same time, you need some people who are able to have lots of tech training, deep knowledge and expertise in the creation of technology, and people who are able to think critically, work with humans, think about ethics. And those two things need to be able to work together. So those aren't separate. I think the future of higher ed will see a really different sense than strict department structures. It's really going to be, how do you bring these things together? How do you use advanced tech? How do you think about technological ways you can use technology to solve problems? And how do you have the very human piece?
Yeah, I think that's brilliant. And sometimes there's a slide I use with Demis Hassabis, the CEO of Google's DeepMind. I think someone was asking him, like, what would you want your kids to know and be able to do? Wall Street Journal just put out a whole piece of, leaders across civil society, but especially the tech companies. And it was sort of like, be an AI ninja, which is a very crude way of describing what you're describing in your report, but, be super fluent, not just as a coder, but really understand these technologies, but then also bring all those kind of critical human skills that are developed in the liberal arts and the humanities. So that makes a ton of sense. So, Emily, this episode's going to air a couple weeks after we do the recording, but hot in the news does include some of what you were just alluding to, which are big ethical questions about AI and government and surveillance. And I'd be fascinated to see where that all shakes out. Above my pay grade for sure. But also in the news and closer to your work was Jack Dorsey at Block laid off about 40% of his staff. Nice, severance packages and the like. But this was, of all the many, many layoffs that are happening in the sector that are attributed to AI, this may be one of the first that are possibly genuinely attributed to that. So how are you all thinking at the Institute about some possibility, and Dorsey basically projected that within a year, he thinks many companies will follow suit, that if AI is as productive and can yield as high level of efficiency as we think it can, that there may be fairly major disruptions to the labor market. And, very often we'll say, okay, every technology disruption, we see job loss, we see job creation. This is moving quickly. Are you all think tanking this around, or how are you thinking about this?
Yes. I'm laughing because I actually have a sign on my office door that says think tanking. So economic mobility is one of the key things that the Milken Institute cares about and thinks about, and all sorts of all the levers that would lead to economic mobility. So absolutely the idea about job disruption, and not just jobs, but it's really what are ways that people may have access to capital. So that's broader. For jobs specifically, yeah, there's nobody is saying that there won't be job loss in certain areas. And I will double down, even though you preemptively said everybody says there's job loss when you get new tech. Listen, the historian in me has to say, yeah, there were telephone operators, and there were, lots of things that existed in much higher numbers. Typists, secretaries typing, that sort of thing, that were in much higher numbers. Things shift over time. Yep. The trick is to making sure there are other jobs that replace them. What a lot of people are talking about now, I will go back to the knowledge economy, is the type of disruption that we saw in manufacturing in the 1970s would be the type of disruption that people see in knowledge economy and professional roles. And I think that really destabilizes a lot of people, because the pathway to having economic mobility seemed really clear in one way for a long time. That people would say, okay, if you can get certain things, if you can get a college degree, if you can purchase a home, these sort of things, start a business, these are ways that you can secure economic mobility. If you have huge disruption in jobs, particularly those that traditionally require a 4-year degree or more, and you have the cost of those degrees skyrocketing, and you have people going into debt and having trouble buying homes, home prices going up, all of those things fit together to paint a picture to say, we need to think really hard about how people get the skills they need to be employable. One of the things I think higher education really needs to, and is already starting to open up to, is the conversation with industry. Now, I know there's a lot of concern, particularly on the faculty side, about privatization or corporatization of higher education. So there's a whole conversation, and probably a whole other podcast we could do on that one specifically. Happy to get into it if you want to. But just to say, rather than going completely one way or the other, to have a really honest conversation, data-based, about where you think people are able to get jobs. So we need to look at all of what we see coming out, where there are this sort of work, and then engage what I was just talking about with the strategic foresight, looking at trends. Nobody can see into the future, but you can see certain trends, and you can see the type of things that you need people to be able to, skills that they need to have to be employed. What I would add to this is there's a lot of focus on the sort of traditional age student, particularly for higher education. All of us need to be thinking about this. Whomever you are, whatever your job is or you want it to be, all of us need to be thinking about, what does work look like for us 10 years from now, and what skills do we need to have? So part of this conversation between industry and education is beyond just the privatization of education. It's really, can we have something, for example, where employers are giving time to workers who are also learners, or should be, throughout their career, so that it's not, hey, I'm taking 4 years off and I'm going to go get a degree, but you can get certain credentials that perhaps are stackable, or that you can do asynchronously, that you can do while you're employed, or you can have a short-term leave while you're pursuing some of that. We all are going to need to have skills. It is happening too quickly for people to rely on whatever their degree was, however many years ago. What you can rely on from that is the critical thinking skills, networks, other things that you may have gotten. For the actual technical skills that you need, we will all need to be updating them.
Okay, I feel better about think tanks right now, because it's making me feel like you guys are thinking about this. I mean, it's a tricky problem, but But yeah, I think everything you've described, it's interesting because Jamie Dimon, again, this will be a little bit dated news, but also acknowledge, I think yesterday, this is going to happen, and there's going to need to be a lot of redeployment. A lot of what you just described, nimble skilling, that's everybody's responsibility, corporate responsibility, higher ed responsibility, and the like. I mean, you've been in this space, and I don't think a lot of the audience has very discrete insight into think tanks, reports, and the translation between the work of a think tank, the development of a report, the development of a roadmap, and action on the ground. What's your sense? Like, as you look at the field, we've been covering Molly Kinder a little bit. I don't know if you all intersect, Brookings, kind of different vantage point, but also talking a lot about careers and jobs. What's the landscape look like in such a rapidly moving field to go from, okay, we're gonna do some think tanking on this, develop a report, develop a roadmap. You guys also have resources to make actionable. Is there a good track record of going from the think tank to the report to the roadmap to, be crass, like butts and seats and people doing stuff?
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, our founder, Michael Milken, will also say we're not just a think tank, we're an action tank. So there is a mandate from on high from our founder that we're not just thinking and talking, but we are actually doing things. Some of the work is around influence, particularly saying helping people think through where they may use their capital strategically. There's other things that we do. We manage some grant programs. One of the things I've been involved with for many years is prize programs where we have people who are starting new companies or piloting different ideas, usually using technology, although not necessarily, who are then highlighted. We do a whole series of criteria. So we then get companies that we think are doing really world-changing things in front of investors so they can then scale. So that's one way that it's really actionable is we look for people. We're not saying we have all the answers. We look for people who are out there building. It's actually a really optimistic place to live because we're talking about headlines we're reading in the news. We all know sometimes it's rough out there and you just feel like, we just want to hear some good news. I am very fortunate that the people I get to be around professionally are builders who believe in the future and philanthropists who say, hey, help us figure out how we can use these dollars to do something actually impactful and good in the world. So you have to have a certain sense of hope and optimism to build for the future, to invest in it with your time or your money. So to me, I see that and I feel really optimistic that we will be able to do things. You asked about sort of action on the ground. When we see pilots of things, when we learn what is possible, one of the things that we get to do at the Institute is connect between ideas, pilots, and then how do you make them scalable? What a lot of people don't necessarily sit down and think about is all the different types of capital that takes to make that really happen. So, for example, when we work with a philanthropist, there's lots of different ways they can use philanthropic capital. That can be to support a pilot. It can be to support an educator, a student, a school, a technology, all types of things. The thing about philanthropic capital is it is quick. So you can just decide and it doesn't have to go through a whole thing. You just send over the money and there you go. Because it's not based on looking for returns, it is patient. So even if it doesn't see something right away, so you can be quick, philanthropy can be patient, and then it can be really catalytic. So you're saying, let's see if this works. And is there a different way we can do things? What we see about that is then we connect to our colleagues who are doing work with, maybe it's public financing or, financial institutions, whatever it might be, to get something to scale. Philanthropy is not going to do that. Philanthropic dollars, even people who are giving hundreds of millions of dollars philanthropically, it's a drop in the bucket compared to other types of capital that's out there. So for us to really make those connections and say, okay, to make an investment, whether that's public dollars, private dollars, somebody's going to need to see this type of thing. So then we say, what can we do with philanthropy to show and to create what is the best of something? So then it can be invested in by other entities.
I love that. And I can see why it makes you feel optimistic and positive. Liz and I spent probably a decade of our work together pre-COVID doing student entrepreneurial projects. So the kind of work that you get to invest in, but all the way down to the high school level. So creative, so thoughtful. And these are not just like gifted and talented kids. These are all kids. And I think in reality, that skill set, as we said at the lead in, winds up actually being really important. I mean, do you see transfer of that kind of startup culture and mentality and even the philanthropy dollars at the startup phase as an alternative to angel investment? I love what you just described. Do you see that like bubbling up in schools and having value in schools?
Absolutely. If there was something I would say we have to add to the curriculum, in addition to AI plus literacy, I would say having kids engage in design thinking, entrepreneurship, creating that mindset that you can build something. That mindset that it's okay to fail. It's not necessarily going to work. You want to try. The ability to have to get up and articulate your idea, the idea that you need to create a business plan, the understanding of how that might work to actually make something come alive is exciting for students. It's something when I volunteer in my kids' school or give talks, I will often say, can we do a design thinking exercise? From as early as I remember actually volunteering in my daughter's preschool class, it was technically pre-K class, and I gave them a design challenge. And these kids who were 4 and 5 years old, the things they could come up with were incredible.
Totally.
Because they're not yet thinking in the world of what's not possible. You then take that through to sort of the teenage years where hopefully they're still holding on to some of that what if mentality, but then they also should have a little bit more understanding about how would you make a viable business. They can be taught that in schools, the confidence to get up, public speaking, if you're getting up and pitching something. It is fantastic. I would absolutely believe that. And I will say something else. Not only is it a good exercise and, oh, isn't that cute? The kids are doing these things. But I will tell you, seeing from experience of working with entrepreneurs, that young people can sometimes come up with ideas that outperform those who are considered experts in the field. We have documented proof of lots of times these sort of ideas that really can come up and be something that can change the world. So it's not just an educational exercise to help their brains, although it is that, but it's something that can actually change the world.
And AI is also now a huge lever for them, right? Because if they don't have depth of technical expertise or marketing expertise or research expertise, they can pull on these tools that like really amplify their abilities. Yeah, for sure. We just had the founder of a really neat, this would be a good milk and investment, by the way. It's a nonprofit called Technovation. It's out of San Francisco. And they have been doing, to your point, the project-based entrepreneurial startup stuff. Started with just young girls, teenage girls outside of school. Now they do it both in and out of school, but they build AI literacy and fluency because AI is integrated into the projects that they're doing. So totally on the same page. Cool mom credit, by the way, too. Nicely done. Coming in doing design thinking exercises with your kinder pre-K. Love it. Real quick, you've been super generous with your time. I know you've been invested with this pilot at Drew. Do you want to just tell us a little bit about that? We can kind of get a word out in the street for it.
Sure, yes. So Drew University, we recently partnered with them for our Future of Higher Ed roadmap, so you'll see more. But when I think about the future of humanities and liberal arts, we had a conversation earlier about why that is so important. There isn't necessarily the bold vision that is going to be, but how do you do it and make that actually a financially viable model? What's really exciting about what Drew is doing, and full disclosure, I do sit on the board, so there is that as well. But I am so excited and proud to work with them and to have them at Milk and Events. Is they are doing something that no other liberal arts college is doing. Two main things right now. One, they're the first college campus in the United States to host a 2-hour learning K-8 school on campus. So that model, some of you may have heard of Alpha schools that came out of Texas. So this 2-hour learning where students have 2 hours for really individualized, personalized learning. And then
Yeah.
they work on collaborative projects the rest of the day. So creative projects, entrepreneurial projects, design projects, building, all those sorts of things off the screen, but then they use the screen time really, effectively. So Drew is the first one who's going to have that on campus.
Mhm.
And then the other thing is they're starting a totally experimental liberal arts college that is just piloting now with a few students, and they're building out to say, what is it going to look like? Now, on the board, it was taking a leap of faith to say, we don't know exactly what would be needed in a higher education institute of the future, but to pilot something and say, we need a new model. So this one has different governance structure, different departmental requirements or structure. So sort of free of some of those things and say, if we were starting again, what would it be? Another main tenet to that is this, what they will call 60-year learning. So throughout your career, is this a place you can go back to get those micro credentials, to get this sort of upskilling, wherever you are, whether you're a kid doing 2-hour learning, a traditional college age student, and that College of Liberal Arts is still going to be there. Their theological school is still going to be there. But what do you need to do throughout your life to be able to go back and get that sort of credentialing within a deep knowledge of technology and all that the liberal arts has to offer? So to me, that's really exciting. We know there are other institutions that are doing innovative things. ASU, Arizona State University, is one people talk about a lot. They tend to be these bigger universities. So as somebody who was educated and taught in small, private liberal arts colleges, what is the future of those types of small, private liberal arts colleges? How can you get all of the benefits of that type of education, but in a way that is fitting with the new reality, economic reality, technological reality? So that's something Drew University is doing that we are keeping a close eye on and are excited to see.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Hampshire College is not too far where I am, which is also very experimental, but struggling financially. My son went to Bard, which is doing fine on resources. But yes, you're absolutely right. Like, not everybody has the bench that ASU has. Is Milken actually involved in that, or is it a personal project for you?
There's a partnership between Milken Institute and Drew University. So there are official partners on future higher education, as well as other partners who are there. I just always feel like I need to disclose so people don't then look up later and be like, wait a second, this lady. But no, there's an official Milken Institute partnership.
Well, and to the case of the Hampshires of the world, right, it's probably great that they've got some safety net of an organization like Milken so that they can be experimental. Fantastic. Emily, you've been so generous with your time, and I feel like I learned a bunch of new stuff. Is there anything in the mix that we didn't get to talk about that you'd love to share? We'll certainly get the links and put them all into the show notes, all that good stuff.
I'll say one thing, actually, if I could add one that I think about. This is maybe going back to the earlier part of our conversation as a mom, watching my kids go through the school system right now. About 10 years ago, before my son was born, and I just had one young daughter, I was working on a project for child-driven learning. And the things that we knew back then, so we did a 5-year project, really what could child-driven learning do? We were learning so much more from neuroscience, the child brain, how we learn, as well as advances in software. So how can you design things that can be really adaptive to different needs? And again, this is over a decade ago. And the results from that study were incredible. What kids could learn with just an hour of this sort of adaptive software. And I now think, fast forward, it's now 10 years later, and futurists love to use that 10-year benchmark. And I watch my kids in school that they don't have any of those things. We know it works. We have the data to show that. And it wasn't just this. There's lots of data beyond that project that I was on. I just mean to say I experienced it personally, and I saw it, and I was so excited about it. I used some of the pilot tablets when my kids were out of school during COVID, or there was no, school to go to physically. That was really helpful. And it just has not been integrated across the board. So those sort of things, when we know what works, and the question is, how do we get it equitably so that no matter who you are, your parents are, your background, where you're sitting, what type of school you're in, that you should be able to have this personalized learning that is going to help you learn better. That's going to give you confidence because no matter where you are, where you need a little bit more help, you will be able to have that. And sitting next to a peer who may be at a different level than you, maybe you're more advanced, maybe you're behind them, but that sort of shame some children feel when they're trying to learn something, or they get bored if they're advanced. We know we can do better. And I really think we are struggling to try to figure out, how do we keep up, and how do we pay for things, and what works, and how do we do it ethically? There is an urgency. We need to do it now. Every day that passes, every year that passes, there are more kids who aren't getting access to that type of learning. So I feel it as an educator, as a mom, as somebody working on these things professionally. We all need to work together across sectors, figure out how to get these things, how to make it scalable, which is what makes it equitable. And we need to start yesterday.
I love it. It's such a good place to land the plane. It is a topic that has become quite prominent in our conversations on this podcast, because though we do know there are evidence-based programs that are showing efficacy, there's also a growing post-COVID anti-screen time. It's a little bit tied up with the phone bans. And so we're trying to really do our best to help school districts think through, where do we have evidence of what works? Maybe there are places where we're using screens that are less effective, and maybe we make some adjustments there. But a lot of this is getting turned into a binary of it all works or none of it works. And so I really appreciate that passionate 10-year view. We know there are tools out there, and that we have to be really strategic in getting them into our schools in meaningful ways. So yeah, echo that 100%. So thank you for the really good work you're doing. I feel like, again, I went from the think tank to the classroom, which is, not a journey that I think everybody gets to do. So I appreciate you helping our audience be able to walk that roadmap, so to speak.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on today.
100%. My pleasure. Thank you. Nice, Liz. What do you think of the interview?
So interesting.
Right?
Really informative.
I love the perspective too, like mom, college professor, just really, really interesting. So thanks so much, Emily, for doing that with us. And Liz, you've got a really cool interview on deck here shortly with the CEO of Educational Testing Service.
I do.
Very cool. All right. So I believe it's time for a little bright bite. So unlike Mark Zuckerberg's AI avatar or the Starbucks app where you can figure out what you should drink based on your clothes and come up with drinks that don't exist. Here's an example where AI is making meaningful contributions to health, society, culture, the environment, natural disaster recovery, all the good stuff.
Yeah. So this article is called The Impact of Artificial Intelligence on Society in 2026 from Promet AI. So this article examines the dual nature of AI integration in 2026, which touches 3.5 billion lives daily through shifts in healthcare, education, and the global workforce. So while AI offers massive efficiency gains, like 40% improvement in cancer detection, 30% productivity growth for businesses, it simultaneously presents significant societal risks, including job displacement for up to 300 million roles, privacy erosion, and the amplification of historical biases. So we've seen tons of healthcare advancements like that cancer detection and compression of drug discovery timelines from 15 years to 5 years. Global healthcare costs could be reduced by over $100 billion through AI-driven systems. But economists describe an emerging M-shaped economy where wealth clusters at the extremes and the middle class will diminish. Algorithmic bias, such a critical failure, and specifically regarding higher error rates in facial recognition for darker skin tones and skewed credit scoring. But future survival for individuals and organizations depends on AI literacy and the cultivation of non-replicable human skills like empathy and complex problem solving.
Yeah, right. It's a balanced thing, as we say all along, but important to keep coming back to some of the positive contributions and meaningful contributions. And I hope we're going to see more in the year ahead. Demis Hassabis seems quite convinced that in the next year, their DeepMind drug company spinoff called Isomorphic Labs is going to do some really, really important work on a major medical issue. So we'll look forward to see that. I'm psyched to see the Starbucks app too, but yeah, maybe like a little progress on Parkinson's or ALS would be great too.
That'd be, a little more impactful for me.
Well, I got to tone down the snark. All right. But Liz, it's always, no matter how snarky I am, it's always just a delight to be here with you. We will see you again next week, again on a Tuesday. Maybe that's the thing. It's a Tuesday recording day. I don't know what it is. Interesting. Let's reflect. But in the meantime, let's
roll the credits.
As always, we'd love to hear what you think. So please let us know at ChatEDU@edadvance.org.
That's edadvance.org. And also rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast on whatever platform you are using. ChatEDU is brought to you by EdAdvance, the nonprofit regional education service center in Litchfield, Connecticut. This episode of ChatEDU is sponsored by the National Center for Next Generation Manufacturing. ChatEDU is recorded, edited, and produced by Andre Angelo and Justin Pasco, whose dedication and expertise bring our discussions to life. ChatEDU's executive producer is the multi-talented rock star Cameron Audia. Additionally, we are grateful for the support of our colleague Gary Robinson, and we appreciate his time and talents. And of course, a big ChatEDU shout out to our fearless leader and executive director, Jonathan Costa, for inspiring the pod. And finally, a heartfelt thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey exploring the thoughtful and innovative integration of AI in education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Costa, and I am the executive director at EdAdvance, and I want you to know how much we appreciate our listeners. If you enjoy the podcast, feel free to explore EdAdvance's other AI services, which include customized professional learning of all kinds, conferences, our new middle and high school student AI literacy course, and our educator and leader micro-credential, co-sponsored by the Southern Connecticut State University Office of Workforce and Lifelong Learning. Just visit skills21.org/AI to learn more. That's all for now, and thank you for listening to ChatEDU.